Have you ever wondered if God's restoration is truly on the way in your life? Perhaps you faced challenges or felt stuck, but deep down, you sense that something is about to change. The truth is, God's restoration often arrives in ways we least expect, and there are signs you can watch for to confirm it. It's not about waiting idly for a miracle to drop from the sky. It's about recognizing the subtle shifts in your life that show God is moving, even when things seem uncertain. Get ready to discover the 5 unmistakable signs that God's powerful restoration is drawing near, and prepare your heart to embrace the incredible transformation that is on its way. When life throws challenges your way, it's easy to get discouraged. You might lose a job, experience a broken relationship, or face a sudden shift that leaves you questioning everything. But here's the thing: what God has planned for you is far greater than what you think you've lost. Like an artist working on a masterpiece, He is crafting something more beautiful than you can imagine. Trusting in His plan is an act of faith, and faith means knowing that even the darkest moments are just stepping stones towards something brighter. So, even in tough times, remember, He's already working on your next chapter. The Bible teaches us that there's a divine reason behind every setback, even when we can't see it. Trusting God's plan is not just about waiting, it's about knowing deep down that what's coming will exceed anything you've left behind. Imagine you're in a crowded room, searching for something valuable, but you're distracted by the noise. Trusting God is like clearing away that noise and focusing on the treasures He has already prepared for you. This trust can only be built by praying, seeking His guidance, and letting go of the past with confidence. There's power in letting go of your own plans and desires. It might feel like a loss when you let go of something you thought you needed. But God's plan is better, even when it feels like you're losing. Think about it this way. A farmer lets go of his seeds, knowing they will grow into something better in the future. Your life is no different. God is planting the seeds of something new, something greater that will bloom at just the right time. So, trust in the process, even when the waiting feels unbearable. It's not about the current loss, but about the restoration that's on the way. It's essential to remember that God's plan for you is much bigger than you can see right now. The challenges you face are just pieces of the puzzle. When you look at your life, you may not understand why certain things happen, but God sees the big picture. He is preparing you for something far beyond what you can comprehend. Trusting Him means choosing faith over doubt, and it requires a heart that believes, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. His plan is unfolding as you pray for His wisdom and follow His guidance. Take a moment and think about the times you've already been through. Haven't you seen how, looking back, God worked things out even when you didn't understand at the time? It's easy to doubt, but when you look at your life from a broader perspective, you'll see His hand in everything. This is why trusting in God's plan is such a powerful act of faith. It's not just about believing in what's ahead, but remembering what He's already done. Your life is a testament to His goodness and faithfulness. But here's the secret. Trusting in God's better plan requires a shift in mindset. It's about seeing beyond your immediate circumstances. When you do this, you begin to see the beauty in every trial. You start to understand that each moment of uncertainty is simply an invitation to grow closer to Him. Trusting in His better plan isn't passive, it's active. It requires you to keep moving forward in faith, praying for strength, and embracing what's ahead, even when it's unclear. The best is yet to come. The key here is patience. Trusting in God's better plan means knowing that His timing is perfect. It's not your timing, but His. And while you wait, you'll find that He's already preparing you, refining you, and positioning you for something much greater. His love and wisdom are guiding you through every challenge. So don't lose heart. Keep trusting, keep praying, and rest assured that His plans are always better than your own. Life often presents us with opportunities that seem good enough, but deep down, we know they're not the best. Just like the Israelites in Egypt, who were living in bondage but chose to stay in the comfort of what they knew rather than stepping into the unknown. We can sometimes settle for less than what God has in store for us. The lure of comfort, even if it's not ideal, can be powerful, but settling for less often keeps us from the greater things God is preparing for us. He's calling you to something better, something that requires faith and courage. Think of it like being in a small boat on calm water. It's safe, but you know there's a vast ocean waiting for you. The boat is comfortable, but it's only limiting you. Settling for less means staying in that small boat, afraid to venture into the vast ocean. God doesn't want you to stay in a place of limitation. He wants to take you to a place where you can grow, thrive, and experience His full blessings. But you've got to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and trust that the ocean of possibilities is far more rewarding. This is where the Bible speaks to us so clearly. Jesus didn't come just to offer us an ordinary life. He came to give us an abundant life. The key is understanding that God's plan for you is not just a little bit better than what you have now, it's radically better. If you're only looking at what's in front of you, it might seem like you're giving up something valuable. But in reality, you're gaining something priceless. To experience God's best, you must be willing to leave behind what's good enough and open yourself to His bigger plans. It's easy to fall into the trap of settling when things seem fine. But think about it this way. Imagine you're sitting at a table with a beautiful spread in front of you, but you're focused on one small plate of food that doesn't even fill you up. Settling for less is like saying, "This is enough," when the table is full of abundance waiting for you. Don't let fear or doubt keep you from moving forward. Embrace the uncertainty, knowing that what God has ahead is far greater than what you have right now. We've all had moments where we've thought, "This is all I deserve." But that's a lie. God has never designed us to settle. Think about the Israelites. They wandered in the desert for years because they were afraid of change. They looked back at Egypt, at their comfort, but missed the greater promise God had for them. In the same way, we might look back at what feels familiar, but we need to be brave enough to walk forward into the unknown. God's blessings are just ahead, and He is ready to guide you into them if you trust His leading. You might be in a season where you're tempted to settle for less, whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal growth. It's normal to feel the pull toward comfort, but that's not the place where true growth happens. To embrace what God has for you, you have to be willing to move past what's comfortable and step into something new. This requires trusting in God's promise for your life, knowing that He's leading you towards something far better than what you can see right now. The truth is, God has something extraordinary planned for you. It's not just about getting by or making do with what's available. God wants you to experience His best in every area of your life. The question is, are you willing to trust Him enough to stop settling for less? When you choose to embrace the greater things He has for you, you'll find yourself in a place of greater joy, purpose, and fulfillment. But the journey starts with saying no to what's good enough and saying yes to His better plan for you. Have you ever felt like your life is stuck in a rut? Perhaps you're hanging on to the past, clinging to what you know, even though it's no longer serving you. The good news is, God is always working behind the scenes, creating something new just for you. Isaiah 43:19 tells us, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it?" This is a powerful reminder that God is constantly at work in your life, preparing new opportunities and blessings that you may not even see yet. But to embrace them, you have to let go of the old and make room for the new. Sometimes, letting go feels like the hardest thing in the world. After all, it's familiar, comfortable, and sometimes even safe. But God's new plan requires faith. Imagine trying to fill a cup with fresh water while there's still old water in it. You have to pour out the old before the new can come in. Trust that what's ahead is better than what you're holding on to. Even if it feels uncomfortable at first, this new path will lead you to greater joy, peace, and fulfillment. Trust that God knows what He's doing, and His plan for you is far beyond anything you could imagine. Think about it for a moment. When God created the world, He didn't do it in a boring, repetitive way. Every sunrise, every change in the seasons is a testimony to His creativity. In the same way, He is creating new beginnings for you. You may feel like your past mistakes or failures define you, but they don't. They're simply stepping stones to the new path God has set before you. Don't let your past mistakes keep you from stepping into what God is doing now. He's opening doors you never thought possible, and all you have to do is trust Him to lead the way. The Bible is full of stories of people who had to let go of what they knew in order to receive what God had waiting for them. Just like Abraham was called to leave his home and go to a land he didn't know, God is calling you to step out in faith and trust that He is doing something new. It's not always easy, but the results are always worth it. God doesn't want you to settle in your comfort zone. He's got new horizons waiting for you, full of blessings and opportunities that will transform your life. It's time to let go of the idea that you need to control everything. If you're always trying to fix things yourself, You'll miss the new blessings that God has already prepared for you. Trust that His timing is perfect, and He knows exactly what you need. The new things He's bringing into your life will exceed your expectations. You'll find that as you release the old, you make room for things that will truly bring joy, purpose, and peace. Be open to what God is doing in your life. Even if it doesn't look like what you expected, embrace the unknown and trust in God's creativity. He's constantly creating and molding, and He's ready to do something new in your life today. Don't resist the change. Welcome it with open arms. The Bible tells us that God's plans for us are good, and His future is always brighter than our past. Trust in His ability to make all things new, and know that as you step into the unknown, you're stepping into a season of incredible blessings. So let go, step forward, and trust that God is leading you to something far greater than you've ever imagined. What new things is God inviting you to embrace today? It's time to let go of the old and open your heart to what He is preparing for you. The best is yet to come, and it's all waiting just beyond the horizon. There are moments in life when we look back, longing for the days when everything seemed simpler, better, or more certain. It's natural to feel that way, but the Bible tells us in Ezekiel 36:11, "I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bring fruit. And I will settle you after your old estates, and will do better unto you than at your beginnings." God is reminding us that His promises for the future are greater than anything we've experienced in the past. Even if you've had some of the best moments of your life, God is preparing something even better. The key is to let go of the past and embrace His promises. God's promises for us are never limited by our past circumstances. Maybe you faced setbacks, disappointments, or moments where you felt like all hope was lost. But take comfort in knowing that God sees beyond what we can see. He's already working on your behalf, preparing a future that surpasses anything you could have imagined. The pain, the losses, the failures, they're all part of your story, but they don't define your future. What God has in store for you is far greater, and it's waiting for you to step into it. Sometimes we get stuck, thinking that our best days are behind us. But God's word is clear. The best is yet to come. Think about the Israelites once again. When they were in captivity in Babylon, they longed for the glory days of their past. But God didn't want them to return to what was. It wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward into something new and better. And in the same way, God is calling you to move forward, not to get stuck in the rearview mirror. What's coming is far greater than anything you've experienced. Imagine if you had a garden filled with plants and flowers, but they were all wilted and withered. You might look at the garden and feel sad, but you wouldn't give up on it. You'd clear out the dead plants, water the soil, and plant new seeds. That's what God does in our lives. He clears away the old, and in its place, He plants something new. Your future is that garden, and God is the gardener. Trust that He is planting something beautiful that will grow and flourish in ways you never thought possible. It's easy to cling to the past, especially when it's been filled with good memories. But God wants us to trust that the future holds even greater moments. The past can serve as a foundation, but it should never be an anchor. Think about Ruth and Naomi. Ruth lost her husband, but God led her to Boaz, and her future was even brighter than her past. God's plan for you works the same way. He may ask you to leave behind what you thought was your best, but He is always guiding you towards something even greater. Your future holds God's promises of restoration, hope, and a brighter tomorrow. So, as hard as it might be, it's time to let go of what you once had and embrace what God is doing now. What He's preparing for you will exceed your expectations. The Bible tells us that God's plans for us are filled with hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Your best days aren't behind you, they're ahead of you, and it's time to start walking toward them. Do you trust that God has something better in store for you than what you've already experienced? The road ahead may not always be easy, but it will lead to something far greater than the past ever could. Keep moving forward and trust that God's promises are more than worth the wait. Have you ever wondered why things don't always happen when you want them to? You pray, you wait, but the answers seem slow in coming. It's during these moments of waiting that trusting in God's timing becomes crucial. Think about Ruth, who waited patiently for God's plan to unfold. She could have rushed ahead and taken matters into her own hands, but instead, she trusted that God was working in the background. Ruth's story is a reminder that God's timing is never wrong. It's perfect. When we trust in His timing, we position ourselves for greater blessings. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own plans and timelines that we forget that God's perspective is different from ours. His view of the world is so much broader, and He sees the bigger picture. We might want things to happen quickly, but God knows when the time is right for us. For example, think about the story of Joseph. He was sold into slavery, imprisoned, and forgotten by others. But God's timing was perfect. He raised Joseph up at the exact moment he was needed, and Joseph became second in command in Egypt, saving many lives. Trusting in God's timing often means waiting through seasons that don't make sense, but the results are always worth it. It's not always easy to be patient, especially when you're facing uncertainty. You might be waiting for a job, a relationship, or an opportunity to come through. But during this time, God is shaping you, preparing you for what's next. The Bible encourages us to be still and know that He is God. Psalm 46:10. This doesn't mean that we should sit idly by, but rather we should trust that God is in control and that His timing will lead us to the right place at the right time. While you're waiting, keep praying, keep believing, and keep trusting. Think about a seed planted in the ground. At first, there's no sign of life, but deep beneath the soil, something is happening. The seed is growing, its roots are expanding, and it's preparing to burst through the surface. In the same way, God's timing is working beneath the surface of your life, even when you don't see immediate results. Keep watering that seed with prayer, faith, and trust, and in time, God's promises will come to fruition. His plan for you is always worth the wait. When we rush ahead of God's timing, we often end up in situations that aren't aligned with His will for us. But when we trust in His perfect timing, we open the door for greater blessings. Remember, God's delays are not denials. Just because things aren't happening when you expect them, doesn't mean they won't happen. It simply means that God is preparing something greater for you, and it's going to come at just the right moment. Trust that He is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. It's easy to get frustrated during waiting seasons, but patience and trust in God's timing allow us to grow spiritually and emotionally. The Bible tells us that faith is built during times of testing, James 1-3. Every moment of waiting is an opportunity to strengthen your faith and deepen your trust in God. As you continue to trust, you'll find that God's plan unfolds beautifully. And when it does, you'll be ready to receive it fully. Are you trusting in God's timing, or are you trying to rush ahead? Take a moment to reflect on the areas of your life where you may need to slow down and allow God to lead you in His perfect timing. It's in this waiting that you will see His promises come to life in ways you never imagined. Sometimes, holding on to what we have can feel like our only option. Whether it's a relationship, a job, or even an old dream, it's hard to imagine life without it. But in order to receive the better things that God has planned for us, we must be willing to let go. Just like the Israelites had to leave Egypt to step into the Promised Land, we too must be willing to step away from what's familiar in order to embrace what God has in store. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Think about a tree shedding its leaves in autumn. The leaves must fall for the tree to thrive in the coming spring. Similarly, God may be asking you to let go of something in your life so He can make room for something new and better. Maybe you're holding on to a relationship that isn't healthy, a job that no longer serves you, or an old plan that doesn't align with your current purpose. By letting go, you create space for the blessings God is preparing for you. It's an act of trust, faith, and surrender. We often fear that if we let go, we'll lose everything. But the opposite is true. God is a God of abundance, and when we surrender what we have to Him, He gives back in greater measure. In the Bible, Jesus tells us that those who give up things for His sake will receive much more in return. Mark 10:29-30. This promise shows us that God doesn't ask us to give up something without replacing it with something better. Trust that He will always bring more into your life when you surrender to Him. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing to move forward. It's about making space for God to work in your life in new ways. When we let go of our old plans or our need for control, we allow God to take over and guide us into His perfect will. Think about Abraham, who was asked to leave his home and go to an unknown land. It wasn't easy, but his obedience to let go of the familiar paved the way for God to fulfill His promises. Just as God blessed Abraham, He will bless you when you step out in faith. The idea of letting go to receive better can be intimidating, but it's important to remember that God's plans for you are always for your good. Jeremiah 29:11. He never asks you to let go of something without offering something far better in return. When you let go of what you're holding on to, you're not just giving up something, you're positioning yourself to receive God's best. The unknown may be scary, but with God, it's always an opportunity for growth and blessing. If you're struggling to let go, start by praying and asking God to give you the strength to release what you need to. It's through prayer and trust that you'll find the courage to let go. Trust that as you release what no longer serves you, God is preparing something better, something that will bring greater joy, fulfillment, and peace. Allow God to be your guide, and you'll see how He works everything out for your good. Are you ready to let go of what's holding you back? It's not always easy, but the freedom that comes with releasing control and trusting God's plan is worth it. Start today by identifying one thing you need to release, and trust that God will fill that space with something even better. Preparing for the best that God has in store for you requires patience, faith, and an open heart. Often, we're so caught up in waiting for God to act that we forget we have a part to play in His plan. Just like a farmer prepares his fields for a bountiful harvest, we too must prepare ourselves to receive God's blessings. This means making room for growth emotionally, spiritually, and practically. Trusting in God's perfect timing is important, but it's also essential to prepare ourselves to be ready when those blessings arrive. Think about a couple planning for a baby. They don't wait until the baby arrives to prepare the nursery, they start before. They gather supplies, set up a crib, and get the house ready to welcome their child. In the same way, we must prepare for the best by getting ourselves ready for what God has planned. This doesn't mean we're rushing God, but we're actively making space in our hearts and lives to receive what He has in store. It's a practical act of faith. One key part of preparing for the best is increasing our capacity to receive. When we trust God and expect great things, we're making room for more blessings. Imagine trying to fill a cup that's already full. It can't hold anything more. But when you empty that cup, it can receive much more. By letting go of old mindsets, fears, and limiting beliefs, we expand our ability to receive from God. Prayer helps us grow in faith and opens our hearts to God's will. As we pray, we prepare our hearts for the incredible things He's ready to give us. Another important step in preparation is taking action. Preparing for God's best doesn't mean just waiting passively for things to happen. It means doing the work, learning, growing, and improving yourself. When the Israelites were about to cross into the Promised Land, they didn't just wait for God to carry them, they had to step forward in faith. The same applies to us. If we want to receive God's best, we must be willing to take steps of faith, even when we don't see the full picture. God blesses action that aligns with His will. Sometimes, it's easy to get discouraged during the waiting process, but remember that God is preparing something far greater than you can imagine. His plan for you is always better than what you could have planned on your own. The Bible reminds us that He can do immeasurably more than we can ask or think. Ephesians 3:20. This means that whatever you're hoping for, God's plan is even greater. Trust in the preparation process, because it's setting you up for something amazing. Trusting that the best is yet to come requires patience, but it also requires confidence in God's promises. By preparing yourself through prayer, action, and faith, you position yourself to receive what God has prepared for you. The blessings that God has in store for you are far beyond what you can ask or think, so don't be afraid to expect the best. Keep your faith strong, stay patient, and know that God's perfect plan will unfold in His time. Are you preparing for the best that God has in store for you? Take a moment to reflect on how you can actively prepare in your life. Prayer, action, and faith. These are the keys to receiving what God has planned. Don't be afraid to expect great things, because they are coming. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where everything seemed unclear? Maybe you were going through a challenge or struggling to understand why things weren't going the way you expected. It's in these moments that we are reminded. God's plan for us is beyond our understanding. His wisdom surpasses ours, and He sees the bigger picture. While we may only see a tiny part of the puzzle, God sees the entire masterpiece. Trusting that He knows what's best for us, even when we don't understand, is key to experiencing His full blessings. Think about a time when you felt completely lost or unsure about the next step. It's hard, isn't it? But when you look back, you might realize that the struggle was part of God's greater plan. We can't always see how the pieces fit together in the moment, But God's plan is always purposeful. The Bible tells us that His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and His ways are higher than our ways. Isaiah 55:9. This is a reminder that while we may not understand, we can trust that God's plan is perfect and better than anything we could imagine. The truth is, God's plan often unfolds in ways that challenge us to grow. It's not always easy, but it's always for our good. Think about the journey of Joseph in the Bible. He faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. But God used those circumstances to position him for greatness. Joseph could never have imagined that all of his suffering would lead to him saving an entire nation. But God saw the potential and worked through every circumstance to bring about His purpose. In the same way, God is working behind the scenes in your life, even when you can't see it. Sometimes, it's tempting to question God's timing or plan, especially when things don't seem to make sense. But remember, just like the story of Job, our understanding is limited. God allows things to happen in our lives for reasons that might not be immediately clear. It's in these moments that our faith is tested and refined. The Bible encourages us to trust in God's timing, even when it doesn't align with our own. His plan is perfect, and it will come to pass exactly when it's meant to. When we surrender our understanding and trust in God's plan, we open ourselves to experiencing His blessings in unexpected ways. God doesn't ask us to understand everything, but He does ask us to trust Him. Trusting in God's plan means letting go of our own desire to control every aspect of our lives. It's about having faith that God's wisdom, even when it doesn't make sense to us, is leading us towards something greater. His plan may surprise us, but it will always be better than anything we could have planned on our own. The beauty of God's plan is that it's tailor-made for us. He knows our strengths, our weaknesses, and our deepest desires. He takes all of this into account when He creates His plan for our lives. While we may not always understand why things happen, we can trust that God is always working for our good. As we pray and seek His guidance, He reveals more of His plan to us, step by step. Trusting in God's plan brings peace, knowing that He is in control. So, are you ready to let go of your need to understand every detail and trust that God's plan is better than yours? It's not easy, but it's the key to peace and fulfillment. Trust that God's plan surpasses your understanding, and you'll experience the incredible blessings He has in store for you. As you reflect on the signs that God's restoration is coming into your life, remember that transformation begins with faith and trust in His timing. How are you preparing for the new season ahead? Are you ready to embrace the changes and blessings that God has waiting for you? Your restoration is not just about external circumstances. It's a deep, spiritual renewal that starts in your heart. Keep praying, stay alert for the signs, and trust that God is working behind the scenes. If you're ready for lasting change, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you can continue learning and growing in God's purpose for your life.